All right, so picking up where we left off, the last lesson that we looked at, the last lesson cast, dealt with the incident of the Great Railroad Strike of 1877. As a result of the strike of 1877, as well as growing issues within other industries, businesses began to take a more hardline stance against labor, especially as labor became more organized and, quite frankly, more violent to some degree or another. First of all, they introduced the idea of having private security for the businesses. And there was one group in particular that specialized in this, a company called the Pinkerton Detective Agency. They were founded by a guy named Alan Pinkerton, who was famous because he had broken up a conspiracy to kill Abraham Lincoln, I believe, in the first inauguration in 1861. Obviously, it didn't hold up well for the second one, but um, Pinkerton established the first private detective agency in America, and they specialized in infiltrating and breaking up unions. They also provided replacement workers occasionally, or at least safeguarded them. So the Pinkertons acted as private armies for these businesses. Businesses also employed blacklists, which are blatantly illegal. It's a list of people who were known union members or sympathizers, and that list was circulated among different companies in an area. Nobody whose name was on that list could get hired for a job, forcing them to either move out of like the county or some cases the state in order to find work. Strike breakers are replacement workers. The Pinkertons also helped either securing and providing these or providing security for them. So replacement workers are just that. If you want to go out on strike, fine. We'll just get somebody to replace you at a lower cost. That's what strike breakers were. They were replacements for the people on strike. Um, this tended to produce a lot of very tense situations and a lot of angry feelings. Last but not least, conspiracy laws. Legislation passed by the government that basically said that if you were a union member and you could be found guilty of being a part of a conspiracy, the government could legally break up the union itself. And these were used quite effectively to limit the ability of unions to function in areas. The unintended consequence of this is that the Marxists actually really benefited because all they had to do was point, at all of what's going on and say, look, we told you from the beginning that the bourgeois are your oppressors, that you're victims, and look at all these things that they're doing to you. We were right. And unfortunately, all these efforts to sort of slow down or to back off of union membership backfired. And it actually led labor to become increasingly more violent and more difficult and militant to deal with. There is perhaps no better example of this than the Great Haymarket Riot of 1886. So, May is generally considered to be the International Workers' Month. I'm not really quite sure where that developed from. It just does. And May Day, which is May 1st, is a super huge holiday, especially in communist countries. It was, in fact, so big of an issue that in Europe, the Roman Catholic Church established a church feast day to sort of go against the communist day of May 1st. In early May of 1886, the AFL, which remember was a union for skilled workers, decided that they were going to ask or call a 1 day strike across the country. The purpose of this strike was to push people to adopt an 8-hour workday. And it wouldn't just be AFL unions, it would be everybody in every possible walk of life. Now, if you're going to do this and you're going to be dealing with skilled and unskilled people, you need to start talking to other unions. So the AFL contacted, for example, the Knights of Labor and other smaller local unions. Well, this means that at some point in time, though, because of the nature of the unions themselves, you're going to run into dealing with anarchists. And this is what happened. the AFL ended up contacting anarchists and arranging with them to be a part of this. Now, our story focuses on the city of Chicago, which was the sort of anarchist capital of the United States. Like, if you were an anarchist, you pretty much headed to Chicago. There were over 7,000 anarchists in Chicago, most of whom were primarily German. And the interesting, remarkable thing is, everybody knew about them. There was no secret to this. They all knew the anarchists were there. The anarchists ran their own newspapers. They put up pamphlets and posters, like, let's talk about how we're going to overthrow the government and what we're going to do here and that. But the brilliance of this is they were so out in the open that nobody really took it seriously. They're all those wacky anarchists and their silly ideas. They're talking again. Oh, but that's all they do is talk. While secretly, the anarchists were actually stockpiling weapons and building bombs in the basements of their newspaper buildings. They also planned and led the strikes in the area. Chicago didn't have a lot of very skilled workers, so most of the unskilled workers were all sort of more or less led by the anarchists. Now, one of the things to understand here is that immigrants, when they came to America, settled in areas of cities where the people were like them. And these areas, the cities, are called ghettos. The term refers to the fact that there's an area where all the Germans would live, all of the Poles would live, all the Italians, all the Irish, all the Chinese, all the African Americans. So they were divided up into sort of ethnic and racial groups. And none of these groups got along with each other. Like, if you were Irish, you did not go into the Italian section and vice versa, because they would just attack you. But this is where the interesting part comes in for the anarchists. Because the anarchists are all united by their wacky political beliefs, they all get along with each other. And they would hold these meetings where they would plan out, like, okay, so this is what we're going to do. So you go tell the Polish group, Polish anarchist. You go tell the German group, German anarchist. You go tell the Irish group, Irish anarchist. We'll coordinate all this. And they went around these immigrant groups and got them really worked up about stuff and got them all feisty and just, sort of the whole Marxist idea of you guys are being victims and there's an oppressor group and down with the bougie and the whole 9 yards. So this great AFL strike is going to occur on May the 3rd. Now, coincidentally, there is another strike already going on in Chicago at the time. That strike is against the McCormick Reaper Company. A grain reaper is like a big machine that harvested wheat. And the McCormick workers had been out of work. They had been on strike since February, so for 3 months now. Oh, excuse me. And to deal with this, the McCormick Company had brought in replacement workers, strike breakers. And every day, these replacement workers would receive a police escort to work. They would get a police escort coming out of work. For 3 months, this went on. No problems whatsoever. The anarchists decide that this great May 3rd strike, they're going to hold their strike right in front of the McCormick Reaper building. So they set up like a platform and they had guys get up to give talks and stuff. And so in the morning, here come the police. They escort the replacement workers. No problems. There's a lot of name calling and stuff, but nothing bad. The replacement workers go in and do their jobs. In the afternoon, the police come back to escort the replacement workers out. As they're leaving, the anarchists had coordinated with everybody in the crowd. They had infiltrated. And they began, at a signal from the guy speaking, to charge at the police, to mob rush the police. Well, naturally speaking, if you're police officers and you're being mob rushed by a huge group, you pull out your guns and you start shooting, which is what they did. 2 strikers end up getting killed. The same day, later on, this appears. It's a call for revenge on the part of the workers. So if you have a chance, pause the video and read through here. The grammar's not too hot, but essentially what it boils down to is working men to arms. Arm yourselves because the police are bad and you have to take matters into your own hands. The next day, on May the 5th, they call for a mass meeting at the Haymarket between Des Plaines and Halsted Street on Randolph Street. And they have speakers there to talk about the Great Massacre, the two guys who were killed. The anarchists purposely distort the total number dead to fit their purposes. So, on the evening of the 5th, or the 4th, sorry, the anarchists set up a stage at the Haymarket, and by their count, somewhere around 2,000 or 3,000 people show up. The police, hearing about what was going on, also show up. So they just kind of stand there while the anarchists give their big speech about, blah, 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 bourgeois, blah, 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 victim, blah, 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 proletariat, blah, blah, blah. Okay, the police say nothing. They do nothing. At the end of an hour or two, nobody's else getting up to speak. The police are like, "You guys done?" And they're like, "Yeah, pretty much done." Okay, so go home. As everybody is leaving peacefully, somebody, one of the anarchists, chucks a homemade grenade. Yeah, this looks like something that should be on like the Roadrunner and Coyote show with a couple of pieces of a metal ball held together by a screw. There's a wick that you light on fire and you chuck it and hopefully it blows up. It did blow up. It blowed up and killed 7 police officers. So it was thrown by an anarchist while people were leaving. The police, not happy, pull out pistols and begin shooting. The anarchists, also armed, because remember they were told to show up armed, that's what it said here, to arms, they begin firing back. When the smoke clears a few minutes later, 60 policemen are wounded. So obviously, like stormtroopers, the anarchists really couldn't shoot anything definitively. But over 50 people who were just there to listen to the talk are killed or wounded. Not taking kindly to being, attacked, the police decide that they're going to go after the anarchists. And on the next day, on May the 5th, they begin rounding them up. Now, this is not like watching CSI. It's not like, we just found this piece of grenade fragment. The type of metal in it is only found at one place. Blah, blah, blah. Let's go to that place. No, it doesn't work like that at all. The way the police investigation and police work used to be back in the day was they would kick in the door, go in and beat people in the house until they found out what they wanted to know. Which, of course, unfortunately, will bring up the idea that maybe they weren't getting true information. So, altogether, 8 anarchists are arrested, and they're put on trial. At the end of the trial, 3 of them are given a sentence of life in prison. One of them commits suicide so that he does not have to face whatever the charge or the consequence of the charge was. And 4 of them committed suicide or were killed. They were hanged. Remember, pictures are hung, people are hanged. The sketchy way that the police conducted their business really overshadowed the whole nature of the event. So much so that there's actually a monument at the Haymarket in Chicago where it celebrates the men who were wrongfully arrested. The real bomber, actually, just as a piece of FYI, got away. He got on board a train on the night of the 4th, headed out to the East Coast, then took a boat to Europe, where he lived the rest of his life in Europe as a celebrity among the anarchists, getting free drinks and free food and staying at people's houses and stuff. If I'm not mistaken, I think he may have actually been murdered at a cafe, but you live like that, you die like that. The problem is that people forget that the reason that there was a riot to begin with, the reason why these problems started, was because the anarchists had started it. And it really points up why it is that anarchy is so successful in America to some degree amongst people, because they do a great job of portraying themselves as the victims of everybody. The police are made to be out the bad guys. There is a monument at the Haymarket to celebrate the anarchists who were put on trial and who were wrongly convicted or killed. I'm not saying that it isn't correct that they were the wrong people. They definitely were the wrong people. But it ignores the fact that the anarchists were to blame for this to begin with. We will look at so a couple of quick things here just to wrap it up. Number one, long-term implications. It really puts the police in a bad light. It showcases the inefficiency of police work, and it really points out the fact that entering into the 20th century, police need to change their protocol because things are going to be different. And we'll talk more about this in Unit 3, that the police are totally unprepared for what the 20th century is going to bring, which ushers in a new modern era of police work. Second thing, the AFL was a skilled union. The McCormick workers were not skilled. The anarchists sort of pointed the blame not for themselves, not even to the police to some degree, but they put the blame of the union activity and the violence on the Knights of Labor. This is one of the things that ended up killing off the Knights of Labor. So this is where we'll end off for today, and we'll pick this up tomorrow. Peace and love.